set? Well, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
No one has moved, but good afternoon. And welcome to the Tuesday, February 10th, 2009 special meeting of the Glendale City Council. Mr. City Clerk, could you call the roll?
Council members Najarian.
Here.
Quintero.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Yusefian.
Here.
Mayor Draymond.
Here. And could we hear your report, please, Mr. City Clerk?
The agenda for the February 10th, 2009 special meeting of the Glendale City Council was posted on Thursday, February 5th, 2009 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
And Mr. Kasakian, could you also read the item at 2 and 2A?
Certainly. Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services regarding proposed Pacific Pool development work at Pacific Park. At 2A is a motion designating the preferred Pacific Park pool preliminary location plan, directing staff to conduct CEQA analysis, and give staff direction on what configuration and elements to include in the conceptual project plan.
Okay, thank you very much. As a moment of housekeeping before we go any further, I have one speaker card that lists oral communications as the pool. Did you mean item 2A? Just okay. All right. Okay, with that, let me go to Mr. Chapchin. I'll hopscotch right over the city manager.
Right.
We're cutting out the middleman, Mr. Chapchin, and
he's an important middleman, by the way.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. We came to you back in November, I think November 25th, with a pool design. You asked us to look at several other potential options for locating a pool. We've done that, as well as looking at maybe reducing some of the costs by not touching the current play structure. So I'll call Dave Ahern up here, who will walk you through some of the options. I think we're going to try to limit the discussion to as few options as possible, because some are doable, some aren't. Dave, okay. Please.
Sure.
Mr. Ahern.
Mayor Draymond, members of the council, Dave Ahern, Capital Projects Manager for the Parks Department. We have a very brief PowerPoint for you. We can go into a lot more detail if you'd like it, but we'll start with a brief PowerPoint. When we last presented to the council on November 25th, we had presented council with 5 options, and those options included a design menu that had 4-lane pools, 5, 6, 8-lane pools, cost ranging from $5.4 to $10.1 million for construction and development, and then annual operating cost in the $375,000 to $750,000 a year range. At that meeting, after discussing all the options, council consensus was to direct staff to redesign to a 6-lane design, to reduce the project cost, to relocate the pool to preserve the existing tot lot and spray play components that are currently out there. Council directed us to eliminate the diving boards and the water slide, and to attempt to accommodate water polo in the design. And that water polo direction is a little more involved because of the different components that different types of water polo play, and we may talk about that in greater detail if you'd like. But the slide on the screen currently, just to get everyone oriented, shows us here's the existing baseball field, here's the basketball courts, the library building is here, the large concrete plaza area is out here, Riverdale is here at the bottom of the screen, and then this is the corner plaza area, and then here is the existing tot lot area and playground facilities. What we'd like to accomplish today, and we've given council a report that has all the options in it, but what staff hopes to come away with today is to identify a revised site plan, identify the project components that the council would like in the project, and then get direction on how to proceed with development of this project. We've provided you with with 5 different locations in your packets that the pool could potentially go into. After our last meeting, staff stepped back and went back to the drawing board and reevaluated the entire site. We looked at all the locations that the pool could go on, and those are in your packets. And the one that we're recommending is the plaza area here in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reoccurring themes that we've heard from the community and from the council is to look for ways to eliminate this large concrete area out here in the plaza, and there's also a large concrete area out here in the plaza. This area in the middle of the screen has all the underground utilities in it, the sewer, the storm drain. If we put a pool there, we'll incur significant costs for relocating those utilities. So of the options that we've provided to you, what we're recommending is that we go with a design that places the pool down here in the corner. It eliminates the large portion of the concrete plaza, preserves the tot lot. It doesn't affect any of the other on-site amenities, the baseball, the basketball, the picnic areas. Keeps all of that. And I think the only thing that we really need to know is what type of pool the council would like. In our last meeting, council had directed us to come back with a 6-lane design. So that 6-lane design would be just the rectangular pool here. If you wanted us to accommodate water polo, we'd have to add this dashed area here, kind of the puts the L in the configuration. That's about a $350,000, $400,000 additional cost. If we have the 6-lane pool, we'd probably go with something that's 3.5 feet deep at this end and 6 or 7 feet deep at this end. If you have water polo, you have to have a minimum of 6.5 feet all throughout, and that would have to, you couldn't have that and just a regular recreational pool. You'd have to add more to it. So that's where this L configuration comes in. So those are the design questions I think that we have based on council's last direction. And of course we have the project consultants here that can talk about costs, we can talk about sources of funding, we can talk about timing, or any other configuration that the council would like. So I think at this point I'll stop and prepare to answer questions, and the consultants are also ready.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ahern. Let me do this and remind my colleagues that we do have a couple of speaker cards. Generally, I give you the courtesy of having input or comment first before we go to the public. You can do that, and then we'll come back to you, or we can just go direct to the public. Mr. Weaver, let me go down the line and just see who would like to make comment before we hear from the public.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Yesterday, Mr. Najarian in the paper referred to my objection to this pool as a knee-jerk reaction to a good idea. Never was. I've talked about it from the very beginning. A community pool in this area is desirable to replace the one that was there. Not our water polo field, not 8-lane pool. A pool for the neighborhood kids to play in. What was there before. Now, at these times, we have a different situation. Last week, those of you who watched the meeting, study session, all 5 of us here said safety had first priority, infrastructure second. In the evening, Mr. Najarian said a pool was his first priority on the list we sent to Washington for possible funding. Nice switch. I will not support any pool at this time because I say it is a luxury item, absolutely needed. But in a time that we're facing the cuts that we are, and you're listening to the president on a daily basis talking about what we can do to employ people, and we're going through cuts too, to think about a swimming pool, even the stimulus package, which had swimming pools in it, had it removed. by the Congress of the United States. And I got a letter today, and I just want to read you a part of it. From a lady who writes, "How much did the new pool at Pacific Edison cost? Plus upkeep, insurance, etc. Where in the Constitution does it say the taxpayers have to pay for a swim in the pool? My life and safety for my family and all of us is more important than a swim. Where is the logic and common sense? Some members of this city lack common sense. Where is the judgment call?" And I've said it's a great idea, but today, this year, and probably into the next 2 years, it's not a good idea. I get too many calls and too many people saying, "What are you doing pushing for a swimming pool? An aquatic center pool," which this is not by any means. It's not an aquatic center, though that name is still used. It is not. I don't support that, and I never will in this location. So, my colleagues, you may discuss any option you want, but the use of our dollars, no matter what category, in a swimming pool in 2009 is the wrong use of money. And I will never support it. So, you have at it.
Mr. Weaver, may I ask you, Mr. oh, just a second.
I'm not staying for any discussion.
Well, may I ask you to at least, we do have two speakers from the public here.
It's not going to influence me. I am not supporting it. I'll watch it on TV.
All right, Mr. Weaver.
Well, let me object to the hit and run that Mr. Weaver's pulling. I think he owes it as his job as a member of the City Council to stay with the governing body to which he was elected and at least discuss the issue. It's unfortunate that he makes such inflammatory and false, misleading comments to the public, to the council, and just scuttles off. I'm very disappointed in his behavior. His job is to be a city councilman, to sit and discuss. And certainly we have disagreements all the time. But that does not mean that you can just walk off and bid adieu to your colleagues as he just did. So I don't know what to say other than to express my disappointment. I do have many, many comments that I wish he would be here to listen to, that I could perhaps set him straight on everything from his funding sources to maybe refresh some of his memory about how we lost that Pacific pool in the first place and who was responsible for paving it over. But I'll wait until we hear from the public or from, I guess, in the due course of the proceedings, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you. Again, let me go back to my left to continue. Mr. Quintero.
Well, just in general, I just want to say that we have a lot of work ahead of us in the next few months, and the new council will have a lot of work ahead of it in the coming year, in the coming few years. And so to arbitrarily make decisions on this is right, this is wrong, without thinking of the entire city, thinking of the whole package, having some kind of vision of where you want the city of Glendale to be in the next few years, just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can't isolate one particular project or one particular funding source and arbitrarily decide that it's a yes or no. And anyway, all I can say is we need to have some cool heads, and we need to have some people that are going to be reasonable and think about things before they just throw it in the trash can. That's my comment.
Okay, Mr. Yusefian.
I'll wait for after.
Okay, thank you. And let's go to the public. Our first speaker is Herbert Milano, followed by Nancy Kent.
Mayor Draymond, members of the City Council and City staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I would like to read very briefly from a youth strategy report of April 23rd, 2002. There is a broad agreement throughout the community that the needs of children, youth, and their families should be a priority to the city. There is also a consensus that the need of youth and their families outstrip the existing system of programs and services being provided by the city and the community at large. And he goes on to say other things. I'd also like to state for the record this particular trend that has occurred since actually since 1992. And here's a trend, if that could be seen on the screen, of a chart that shows a significant drop in violent crime since 1996 by more than 80%. And similarly, if I have property crime, it has actually dropped the same amount. The question that I'd like to place for the council is that as the community looks in the normal way that a community perceives crime and safety, is that obviously it should be first. But there has to come a time when we begin to evaluate if the resources that we are continuing to add to safety, are they giving us the right type of outcomes? We've had a significant decrease before the augmentation. And after the augmentation that began to occur in 2004, for all intents and purposes, we have some, very minor on an average increases in the actual safety. There's a point in time on which we have to evaluate whether those additional tens of millions of dollars that are going to safety are being used appropriately, and I think that is the question. Oftentimes we get a statement being made that we're going to measure things in terms of police per 1,000 population. And I can tell you studies that tell you that that is an inappropriate approach to basically evaluating public safety. If you go to Miami, they have fewer number of policemen per 1,000 population. And if you go to a community that has everybody living over 65, I'm sure that the crime per 1,000 population will drop and the need for policemen per 1,000 will drop. It's irrelevant. And for anyone to use it especially during this time of the political season, is inappropriate and it is misleading. And unfortunately, most people don't have the opportunity to see another way of looking at the expenditures for, let's say, police and fire, which have grown astronomically. We have to have, at some point in time, evaluate how we use those funds. I also would like to state that I have, after taking some of these documents concerning the pool project and presenting it to other developers, they said that this project, as presented with this particular cost, are significantly expensive, that others could actually do it for much less, and I think that the City Council should investigate perhaps other alternative venues where we can actually get the same type of facilities for much less. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Milano. Nancy Kent.
Nancy Kent, resident of Glendale. I believe the previous pool at Pacific Park was just a pool with no landscaping in the pool area, just the cement deck. Swimming pools in parks do not need poolside landscaping. Also, the cement deck around the future pool should be the minimum amount required. Next point, the staff says placement in the plaza would conflict with the plaza fountain. To me, that's a plus rather than a minus. Last time I looked at the fountain, its water was shut off. Before that, some of the lion heads were still spitting a stream of water, but several others had water dribbling out of their mouths like drool. Green algae grew on the wall right under each drooling lion. After the water was shut off, the algae was gone, but white hard water stains remained below some of the lion heads. The fountain has a plaque about Cesar Chavez. I associate lion head fountains with hereditary monarchies, which I think are the opposite of Cesar Chavez. The symbolism works for me of a municipal pool replacing this once regal fountain, and I hope the pool will be named for Chavez. Next point, it will be a maddening waste of taxpayer money to demolish the picnic shelters, the basketball court, or the tot lot. I believe these are the only truly covered picnic tables in South Glendale. There used to be lots of covered tables at Maple Park, but that area was demolished decades ago. The tables at Palmer Park are covered with lattice work, so if it's raining or drizzling, you get wet. And on a hot day, you're in filtered sunlight instead of shade. Regarding the basketball court, there are usually always some people using the one outdoor basketball court there, often a group at each of the two hoops. Regarding the existing tot lot, demolishing and replacing it would be obscene. Regarding the baseball field, I've observed it's not used as much as the soccer field, but if you vote to demolish it, you'll probably hear later from people who are not aware that this is being discussed today. I hope you will use the plaza area for the pool, but if you don't, the baseball field is the second best location. Next point, it's good that the staff report mentions LEED certification and using sustainable building materials. However, the wording about solar power is pretty iffy. Quote, passive solar water heating, and active solar power generation, if it can be shown that these technologies make long-term financial sense, end quote. Is the jury really still out on the long-term cost effectiveness of using solar power? The city should show leadership in using solar power on every major municipal project, including the roofs of the building in this project. And next point, since it does rain in California, I would ask that all new municipal buildings have at least a slight slope to the roof, no flat roofs, and I will leave it to you folks to see the big picture of when you should actually build this project. Thank you.
Thank you, and for the record, I don't know, but I just want to clarify that Ms. Kent was, when she was referring to drooling lion head, she was not talking about your city council. I'm just teasing. Okay. She's shaking her head no. She did not mean the council. All right. That is our last speaker card on this item. Let me start on my right this time. Mr. Yusefian.
Okay. I think if you have to build a pool, this is actually the best location that the staff has showed. I read the staff report. I didn't talk to Nancy Kent, but I'll tell you my second choice is the baseball field, but I have the same concerns that I talked to staff this morning, and apparently about 300 kids use the facility. So if we put it over there, now we're just going to take a whole bunch of kids that are not going to have a place to play. As far as the design of the pool is concerned, as I talk to more people who uses for whether or not there should be for water polo or whatever, I am come to a conclusion that it doesn't justify doing the dog leg and to do the water polo thing, because most of the water polo things, the games that are played in the schools and high schools have their facility and they're using it. And this is not a professional size water polo pool, which would require a much larger pool. And hence, you're not going to be generating any money from any outside commercially played water polo people. So you're back to the same high school kids, and so they already have the high school pool. So that doesn't do anything. So that's where I am on that water polo section. I have, going through several iterations and several meetings, I have reached a conclusion that we need to go back to what we used to have in Pacific Park, which was just the community pool. I think sometimes you go to yourself, gee, why did we have to go through all the exercise? But I think it's important to go through the exercise so later on somebody doesn't come to you and say, well, gee, didn't you think about this or that or the other one? We thought about all the avenues, and looking at the issues and looking at the timing, I think I'm more comfortable with maybe a pool, which I checked. The original pool there was the same size as this pool without the dog leg. That's what it was. And so if it was 5.5 feet and 3.5 feet shallow side and just a rectangular 6-lane pool without a lot of fanfare, that's something that I think this belongs in that location for that neighborhood. This is not, I agree with Mr. Weaver, this is not a regional recreational aquatic center, because that requires a much larger facility, and this is not one of them. But I think what this will do is will replace the pool that was there before and it was taken out. Now we're basically putting it back on. Now, I have a couple of concerns. I've been walking door to door and talking to people during the election cycle. I will tell you, the public has no concept of what a pool that is a minimum will cost. They have heard what they read in the paper. They heard numbers of $7.5 million, $10 million, and their question point blank is, why are you building this pool when we have to let SROs go out of high schools or junior highs? And I've been trying to explain to them that this was an amenity we had. We took the amenity out. This is the only amenity. There's no other pools. And they go back to the issue that they are very frustrated because they feel their safety is being compromised. Now, while public may not have all the information, I do. And at the end of the day, I have to make policy decisions. I would like to see a pool, as I said, with its in configuration, smaller, to see if the funding could be taken care of by just a CDBG, a funding that we don't have to pay, and to design it in such fashion to reduce and minimize the operating expense. To me, the operating expense is even more concerning than the pool, because $300,000 a year or $500,000 a year, that's between 3 to 5 police officers. At a time that we are reducing costs, it's very difficult for me to walk in that direction. In 2002, when the report was written, real estate market was going up, cost of housing was going up, and people were making money like there was no tomorrow, and we were flush. This is 2009. A whole different ballgame. Whatever happened before, it's over, folks. New day, new rules. And I have to obey those rules, which says, don't spend money you don't have. So, saying what I desire, I think it is appropriate at this time for us to find out what it is, design it, figure out what the cost is going to be, and maybe put it on a shelf for a while until we get our own house in order. Folks, next year is going to be a lot worse than the year before. So it's, and from the president down, they're all warning us about it. And if we just stick our head in the sand and say, it ain't so, guess what? We're just going to be rolled over. So I think it would behoove us to design a simple pool, figure out what it's going to cost, maybe get some bids to see how far it's going to be. And I have some people in the construction business, I'll tell you, if you get a price for $6 million on this pool, somebody's really sticking it to you. But nevertheless, get a price, and then I think we should just wait, because to me, my worry is the maintenance cost. It's the maintenance and operation every year until we see where we are on our budget. And no offense to my colleague, you know, I know he wants a pool. I agree with him. I'm not saying that it's not necessary, but nevertheless, these are bad times. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Yusefian. Mr. Najarian.
Thank you. I do have several comments, and it's unfortunate that I have to address them to the empty chair on the edge of the dais. I think that empty chair clearly shows a contempt for the city council. I think it's just outrageous that a city councilman, in the middle of obviously a energetic discussion on something that's important to this community, folds up his folder and just walks out. And it's particularly more egregious when you look at the history. Now, Mr. Starbird, correct me if I'm wrong, but Mr. Weaver was on the council when the city decided to pave over the Pacific Pool.
Mr. Najarian,
I'll assert that he was.
well, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Najarian, I can't. It's possible he came on in 90.
He was on the city council.
12 years. Well, I'm trying to think. I got here in 98, and much of the design had been done. Whether the concept started before he got on the council or not, I'm not sure.
It was 96 he was elected.
Okay, then he was probably on the council when the basic design was approved.
And if I'm not mistaken, that was the last city pool that we had.
Mr. Najarian, I remember that conversation because I was sitting on the audience. Ginger Bremberg was the only one, and I think you can get the tape of it from the library. Ginger Bremberg was the only one who voted against that, and the rest of the council voted to take the pool out.
So I think it's particularly egregious when the councilman that voted to pave over our last public swimming pool, a desperately needed recreational facility in what was then and is still now the densest part of the city, and someone mentioned the densest part of the entire area, exceeding our city limits, and now believes that a pool, to return that pool, is a luxury. I think that's completely absurd. And Mr. Weaver played a few little games, if you were listening. He described my support of public safety, yet at the same time, when we were talking about capital projects and our federal appropriations priorities, that I named a pool as my priority. Well, he's comparing apples and oranges, and it's simply a misstatement. Either he does not understand the difference between those.
Sorry about that.
Or he's attempting to intentionally mislead the public.
That was
and,
Mr. Weaver, by the way.
And perhaps to mislead my colleagues. The community needs this pool. It's something that they had. It's something that was taken away. It's something that will serve the community in numbers that will far exceed any baseball field, any soccer field, any picnic area. There will be thousands upon thousands of annual users of children, and not just children, and not just water polo players. We're not going to have the World Cup water polo here, but we're going to have a pool of sufficient depth to at least take a dive from the side of the pool without breaking your neck. We're going to have a pool where seniors can go and do water aerobics. We're going to have a place where children can be taught to swim and be taught to save their lives, because drowning is one of the leading causes of death for children under the age of 10. It's going to be a place where chubby kids and kids who don't get enough exercise can do some swimming, can do some jumping, can use some energy, can avoid childhood illnesses on the rise such as obesity and diabetes. It's going to be a chance where kids can learn skills that they can use for jobs, such as life-saving, such as lifeguarding. It'll be a chance to compete, not as professionals, not as Olympic stars, but just the kind of competition that we all should be afforded as children. To line up against one of your neighbors, to line up against a kid down the block, to have somebody blow the whistle and go at it for 25 yards, and God bless it, whoever reaches the other end first, will have a smile on his face. The loser perhaps will try to swim a little bit better and work a little bit harder. And those children will learn competition, and they'll learn dedication, and they'll learn focus. This is what we're trying to bring to our children, our adults, our seniors. Many seniors have joints that are afflicted with arthritis. Artificial joints are surgical procedures which they have. They need exercise too. A community pool will give them a chance to get in with their friends and neighbors, with people of all ethnicities, races, and turn on that goofy music and start jumping up and down and flapping their arms, having fun, splashing in a water aerobics class. It is not a luxury. It's a necessity. And when you look at every other city around us, they all have much, much better facilities than we're proposing than this modest pool. And the fact that it's not a regulation water polo or a regulation Olympic size, well, I think we should still do our best. Clearly the baseball field is not a regulation baseball field. Clearly the soccer field is not a regulation soccer field. We should do the best we can, because no other project will have as great an impact on our city than returning this municipal pool. I have questions on answers to the questions on the funding. The money that goes to pay for a police officer is not the money that goes to pour the concrete, to fill the pool, to put in a filtration system. One is capital, one is operations. And we have targeted the money. We went through this a year and a half ago on the park impact fee. And as the projects come up, the money is earmarked for parks. We have almost $1 million earmarked from the Algimax project that's going to be going up shortly. And we just learned that the Triangle project on Los Feliz and Central is going forward. And clearly there's going to be funds generated from there. So to run and hide in a cave and say we don't have the money at this time and let this opportunity pass from our hands would be negligence on the part of this council, because those CDBG funds have a lifespan. They can't be put on the shelf forever. To let this sit there is going to cause that money to expire. We need to go forward with this. Now, I do have strong reservations on the cost estimates that we've been receiving. From what I can see, we've accumulated close to $5 million at the moment, a little more than $5 million. We should be able to build a pool for that amount. And I've done some research. And I don't have a 6-point plan, but I've looked at this very carefully. I've looked at the city of Park Ridge, Illinois, with their Oakton Park pool project, where they built a 50-meter pool by 8 lanes with a complete separate play area, splash area, with maintenance facilities, with locker rooms, with a parking lot, slides, diving boards, and a separate diving pool for less than $10 million. And granted, that was done in 2006, but I can't imagine that the costs are that much more. This is a suburb of Illinois. This isn't some little hick town out in the Midwest where contractors are cutting their estimates down to the bone. This is an urban area, and it can't be much different than what we're facing here. So my point is that I do think that we can get a lot more than what we actually think we can for the money that we've set aside. In terms of operations, let's not miss an opportunity to buy a car because we're worried about not having the gas to put in it. There's a lot of options for the maintenance and the operations of this. Everything from us running it to bringing in a private company to do the operations. That is an issue that we have not discussed yet. We have not gone into the details. But by the time we have to face that, we're looking at least 2 to 3 years. This isn't something we have to look in the 09 budget to find where the money is going to come from. It's a long way down, 3 years, 2 to 3 years. Even if we started moving today, will give us plenty of time to explore the options for the operations. So I am, to the core of the question, I'm happy with the pool in its configuration, the L shape, and perhaps I'm not being exactly truthful. I'm not really happy with that. I think the community deserves more. They deserve a larger pool. They deserve a deeper pool. They deserve a pool with diving boards and maybe some slides. But in realization of the financial realities, I'm willing to bite my tongue and swallow my pride and accept a pool in that current design. This is not an aquatic center. It's not an aquatic complex. It's nothing that I'm going to be bragging about when I go to other cities and say, gee, we've got that Hot Shot Pacific pool. No, and many communities do go and brag about their athletic facilities. Santa Clarita, Pasadena, La Mirada. It's something that's the bare minimum for our children, our adults, and our seniors. The location is fine with me. The design is fine with me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Najari. Mr. Quintero.
Let me go on the record once again and say that I absolutely opposed taking that pool out, and I actually appeared, I believe it was in the evening, that evening at the dais, and registered my opposition to taking out that pool. That pool could have been rehabbed, and it could have been left in place and not affected the rest of the design. However, that didn't turn out that way. But essentially, if the pool is built, it will be a better pool, better facilities, etc. So in the end, the community will benefit. Pacific Edison has become a center for life in South Glendale, and especially in western portions of South Glendale. There is a library there that's constantly in use. Of course, you have the auditorium, and basketball courts, the outside basketball fields, the Little League baseball, the soccer, the tot lot. This is a center for community activities, and building a pool there will make it even nicer and afford even more opportunities for the neighborhood. And it is an extensive neighborhood. It's by far the densest neighborhood that we have in the city, one of the densest neighborhoods in the city. The entire belt, let's say south of the 134, is going to benefit by this pool, because I don't think it's just going to be the immediate neighbors. There'll be people, teenagers, older folks, there'll be people, families coming to this pool for the different activities. Maybe one of the teenagers will be playing basketball and someone else will be doing something else. But at any rate, the need for a pool is unmistakable, and it has been for many years. We've been budgeting right down the line. We've been getting money from all the different sources, from community development, the state grant that we've received, the parks fees that we initiated not long ago. So all of the developments in the redevelopment area will go to help fund this pool. So there's no question that we can put the package together without affecting police and fire or any kind of or other types of services. And let me say once again, we're entering a period where we're going to have to make a lot of decisions. We're going to have to balance things, and just a immediate rejection and immediate no, that doesn't make any sense. That's not why the people of Glendale elected us. They elected us to come here and make some decisions and do the right thing on their part. And that includes all of the folks south of the 134 freeway. So at any rate, I am for this pool. I want to continue the process. We're not going to make a decision tonight. Or this afternoon. We're not going to allocate the funds this afternoon, but we're going to go to the next step in the process. So along those lines, this corner location, I think, is the best bet. And I am for a basic pool. I want to have a pool that sort of replaces the old pool, even though it's an absolute upgrade. So I don't think we need to add the L configuration. I'm happy with just a good size. That would make it 6 lanes. Is that correct? Yeah, a 6-lane pool I think is adequate. And absolutely, the solar power, we need to get GWP involved and any other people that need to be brought on board, but we need to use all the renewable energies for this particular pool. Maybe we can even use it as a demonstration project, whatever it takes, but let's make sure that this makes some sense environmentally. Then in terms of the overall maintenance, I think I know there's a group forming Friends of the Glendale Park, like we have a Friends of the Library and so forth. So as that group begins to gear up, hopefully we'll be able to tap some of their resources, and there might be some ways to help with operations, maintenance, etc. In terms of when we're going to do it, when are we actually going to break ground or begin to rip the concrete apart? It's going to be a while, folks. So no matter what we do this afternoon, we still have a while to go before we reach that point. But I am for continuing our efforts along this line and bring something to the whole of Glendale, because I do believe that there'll be lots of people who are going to come from other neighborhoods in the city that are going to go to that pool. I may be one of them. I might like to go there and swim some laps and just generally relax. So at any rate, I think the staff has done a good job of presenting all of the alternatives, etc. I do have a a question. In terms of the $1,000,004, it says CIP General Fund. That is money that would be transferred from the general fund to the CIP, or just a CIP allotment?
We refer to that as funds in the CIP that aren't restricted. So it's the CIP's general resources.
Okay, yeah, so it is the CIP specific.
Yes.
Right. Okay, so anyway, there's a nice sort of combining of funds from different sources, none of which go to pay police and fire. They are capital improvement funds. I see a Prop 40 allotment, another Prop 40 allotment, the CDBG funds, the park impact fees, and like Mr. Najarian mentioned, this Algemac project there in San Fernando Road is coming up, but the Triangle project will absolutely increase the park impact fees. So altogether, I think we can put this together. We can go to the next stage, and hopefully the residents of Glendale will once again have a nice state-of-the-art pool that they can use and swim in and hang out in, and perhaps even visit the library and do other things in this Pacific Edison complex. That's it, Mr. Green.
Okay, well, we will all look forward to coming and visiting you with your new office hours down at Pacific Edison Pool. I guess this will be you float up with your water wings and ask the councilman. Okay. A clarification, Mr. City Manager. When you say they are CIP funds but unrestricted how and what could they be used for?
Well, unlike gas tax revenues or CDBG, you could use them for any capital projects, regardless of location or type. The City Council could transfer those funds back into the general fund and use them for general fund purposes. We think of the sales tax revenues that are allocated directly to the CIP and Shoal Canyon revenues that are allocated to the CIP that are not part of the post-closure set-aside. We think of those as the CIP's general fund type revenues, general revenues that are not restricted as a special revenue would be.
So, to say that if we didn't touch that $1.4 million for this project, it could be used for some of the things that some of the folks in the community who are nervous about SROs and the loss of SROs, could those funds conceivably be used for that?
They could be, but because you wouldn't have an ongoing source, the question would then become, once those funds run out, how would you cover those operating costs? Generally not good financial policy to use one-time funds for ongoing programs.
But in terms of some of the things that some of the departments tell us they must have, for example, a radio program.
That's right.
I'm not talking about on-air radio program. I'm talking about wireless communications, police, their radios, etc. All right. Here are some of my concerns and comments. Let me talk about how our community functions today versus when I was a kid. Mr. Weaver isn't here, so I feel like I should pick up the burden of that lecture. I won't start as far back as the 40s, but
You were a teenager then.
Yes, exactly. I mentioned to Mr. Chapchin earlier that I have photos at home of my family at the Pacific Pool down there. Our community functioned differently in those days, and somehow or other, in more recent years, we divide the city all up into north and south and east and west, and the 134 has become the dividing line that we all used. We used to go to Maple Park Pool, the wading pool there, to the pool at Pacific Park. We used to picnic regularly at Central Park and so on. There weren't these artificial boundaries, and we by no means were a family of means. That all changed, and one of the reasons that all changed is because, and it's not due to anyone on this dais, but our predecessors changed the way they viewed what the layout of this city was going to be. And they crammed a lot of housing, a lot of multi-units, and a lot of people into South Glendale. And I don't think they adequately, I know, they did not adequately plan or think about the need for recreational facilities, parks or otherwise. There are areas where Mr. Milano and I disagree, but that's one area where I think we do agree, and that is that, it isn't some malevolence on the part of the city council, the current council, to say there is no park space down there and there's no property to buy, or to throw people out of their housing to create park space down there. We do the best we can with some of the small parks, but in terms of recreational facilities and large-scale parks, I think a lot of that went out the window when we decided we were going to convert a lot of South Glendale into just multi-unit housing with no thought about the rest of this. So, that is another point I wanted to make. I think another problem in this city is that for many years Glendale has placed all its eggs in the retail/commercial and housing development basket, with very little concern or very little interest in other aspects, like the need for recreational facilities and parks to facilitate our own homeowners and our own residents, and things related to arts, culture, and design, and so on. Ironically, now that we're in a downturn, and the downturn is affecting those two elements, retail and housing, we find ourselves in a real bind, a bigger bind than we might have had we, I don't know what word to use, diversified into investing in some other areas. However, that's where we are now. And I want to talk about the other phrase that some of my colleagues used. Mr. Yusefian used it. Well, all three of my colleagues up here used it, and that's the topic of opportunities and the lost opportunities. It's not in the right part of the city, Mr. Milano, but there was a time when the county wanted to give Crescenta Valley Park to the city of Glendale. Take it. Why? Because they couldn't maintain it. And I believe the reason we didn't take it is because we couldn't afford to maintain it either. But these are opportunities. Verdugo Park was an opportunity. People who said it should be a housing development. But wiser heads prevailed, and we have a sizable park down there with not just a park, but also other facilities there as well. For me, Rockhaven was another such opportunity, and I think my colleagues have gotten criticized along with me for that, and I apologize for that, the fact that you all have taken some of the criticism for that, but that was another opportunity that we didn't pass up and we should not have passed up. This is an opportunity as well, and we can't pass it up. In fact, what we're doing is we're taking, in a sense, we're making up for more than just the fact that we took out a swimming pool. We're also making up for the fact that we have more than 10,000 apartment units down in that area, and I would only ask that my colleagues start using the phrase more densely populated and saying it's a denser area. They're smarter than we are, I think. We've allowed that to happen. We need to do something to give back there. And that's where the need is, in that part of the city, servicing those areas where we have multi-units without swimming pools, without park space. At least we need to do this. Now, where I have a problem is with the dollar figure. That's my biggest problem here. And I am prepared to support something in the realm of I think the figure was a $6.1 million pool. I also do not believe we're getting a good number here. I just don't. I have too many people in the commercial pool building industry, not just in Glendale, but region-wide, who are telling me I'm nuts when I talk about these numbers. Now, I admit I know nothing about commercial pools other than going to swim there. But I'm hearing it from far too many people. I would like some assurance that we're not getting a higher bid because we're a city, because we're fill in the blank. I don't know what the reason is, but I'm hearing that from loads of people, and loads of people in this industry. So and I think you're hearing it from all of my colleagues, every one of us. So if those are the numbers, those are the numbers, but I would certainly like to know that if we're putting in simply a 6-lane pool, and I frankly, and Mr. Najarian, I feel terrible about the fact that we don't get a larger pool. I feel terrible about the fact that we don't get a pool that can grow with the community, but they are the constraints, the economic constraints in which we find ourselves. So I'm going to support a 6-lane pool. I am prepared to forego the water polo aspect of it to keep the pool numbers down, not just from the construction standpoint, but also from the maintenance and operation standpoint. I would like to see a pool sufficiently deep to be able to offer senior swimming and water aerobics and all of those things. I feel I need to forego the water polo component if and unless we can bring it in with that component at a lower number. I can't go to the public at this point and say, give us a $7-8 million pool. But if we can find something around $6 million, you got my vote. Again, I want to stress that we're not approving a dollar amount on the pool today. That is not what the motion is. And I'd like to hear from you, Mr. Chapshin, if we were to move today, when would we break ground, at best?
12 months? Yeah. Probably in about 12 months. And if you wouldn't mind me making a suggestion, we could have the dog leg as an alternate. When the time comes to bid it, if the bids come in very low, that could be an alternate if there's money in the budget for it.
Personally, I have no objection to that, but as an alternate. I mean, that's just my personal view. You'll hear from my colleagues as to what they prefer. But it's not that I'm dying to eliminate an extra use for the pool. What I'm trying to do is find a way in my head and my heart to accommodate my constituents, our constituents that are saying, yeah, we need a pool there. We need this desperately. But what we need most, first and foremost, is a place to cool off, a place for parents to take their kids, for grandparents to go with their grandkids to cool off. That's first and foremost. If we can get more for our money out of it by going out to with an alternate design when we go out to bid and see if it comes back below that numeric threshold, that financial threshold, then I will certainly support that.
Mayor Draymond, we've spoken to the consultants. We think we can bring this in, sharpen the pencils, within the $6 million budget, 6-lane pool, with some shade structures. We may not be able to build all the shade structures initially, and maybe we can phase that in at some point, in added years. But we think we can bring this in for that price.
Let me say that if you do bring a design that has shade structures, some shade structures, but not all, let's please also design it in a way that it can accommodate additional shade structures as we go. We're not talking about landscaping, by the way. We're talking about shade structures without having to rip the place apart. In other words, let's do it smartly so that we can add without demolishing in order to increase the amount of shade structure. Another thing is I like the location there. I have no interest in supporting putting that pool somewhere on that property where we're going to lose some other recreational facility. I am still having trouble choking down the fact that we're going to remodel the Central Park. We're going to take out tennis courts in order to put in a drive. That still rankles, and I still don't like that. So to talk about taking out part of a baseball field to put in a pool, I won't support that. I think this is a good spot, but particularly it's a good spot because of where apparently all of the utilities are. So we avoid that. Let me see. All right, I think that short of repeating things that my colleagues have said that I agree with, I I will stop and go back to my colleagues. I'll start on the left this time. Mr. Quintero.
Okay, well, I agree with, I think, pretty much what you've said. Yeah, I mean, I would support the alternative for the water polo, but I'm saying I would support the alternative, but I guess I would if the bids are so low that it sort of makes sense to do it. But outside of that, once again, I'm just looking for a nice basic pool that you can swim laps, hang out, do aerobics, et cetera, et cetera. But, and I do feel that in the coming months that the bids will be lower and lower. So I do think we're going to get a very good choice from the various contractors. But at any rate, I'm glad we're going to move forward with this to the next phase, and hopefully it'll be built soon.
Mr. Najarian, let me also ask you as we go to you, because this has been, I know this has been very difficult for you because you've watched this project roll in as a Cadillac and be altered and changed and changed and changed. And I know you've also gotten some criticism, trying to say this is our aquatic center. Just for the record, I've been asking since I came to this council, are we talking about an aquatic center or are we talking about a community pool? And every time I've asked that, you've responded, community pool. So I know that you aren't thinking that this is our aquatic center that we would love to have, but can't swing right now. Bottom line is, I want to know whether you would support the idea of an alternate bid, one that would include a water polo component, one that would not, and see where we come out financially. I understand what I'm asking you is, 50% of something rather than 100% of nothing. I know that's not what you want to hear from me, but nonetheless, I have to ask you because I want to know how to vote. I support this project, and I support the idea of bringing the pool. But I think we all know economically we have to be mindful of what the numbers are. And so I think, if I may speak for my colleagues, I think we want to hear from you on this.
I think clearly this is not an aquatics complex. It's a community pool. But I think we still owe it to the community to get as much of a pool as possible for our dollars. So in that regard, since we don't have a set of final design plans, and since the market may actually be dropping as we speak for the bids on these type of municipal projects, just get us as much as we can for our budget. I think that's the best that's the most fair and best goal we can have. Don't exceed our budget, obviously. I don't want this to fail because I want more than we can afford, but let's just get as much as we can through negotiations, through design. We talked about value engineering, and that is a little early in this stage to actually present any numbers or savings, but just get us the best we can. I know this isn't going to grow to 50 meters. It's not going to grow to, 10 lanes. It's not going to grow to include a separate diving well in the other corner. But I would support just getting the best value we can for our dollar.
By the way, one of the issues was one of the speakers, Nancy Kent, had asked about the spray splash area, and I forgot to mention that one of the reasons I support this is because it leaves the spray splash area intact, and even though I know it has some maintenance issues and some repair issues, I'd rather see us work with that than either lose that component or tear it down to rebuild something similar. So, Mr. Yusefian.
Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of questions, and that is on the issue of funding. Did somebody answer me these questions? Prop 40, Robert Z. Berg, Harris Grant. Do we have that?
Mayor Drayman, members of the council, the grant funding you're talking about is in place, but it's currently frozen.
So did we actually get it, but it's frozen? Okay, so $542,000.
Mr. Yusefian, let's get an answer on the record as Mike was off.
We have the grant approval.
Okay, and Prop 40 Capita Grant, $880,000. What is that?
That's
A different grant?
it's a different grant. It's in the same situation where we have the grant approval, the funds are frozen.
Okay, so these two funds are frozen. Now, when do they get unfrozen? When the state passes a state budget, or they may just kind of said, they're issuing IOUs now. So when do you anticipate these monies, by any chance?
Again, just to be honest, we're not certain when they're going to unfreeze it. I think the State Department of Parks feels that once they settle on the budget, they will be frozen. I don't see any guarantees at this point, to be honest with you. And they are, Prop 40, they're per capita formula, so it's based on city's population. So we do get that money at some point. But when we get it, when they'll unfreeze it, we're not certain.
Okay, the reason I ask that, because I just did a little addition in here. I'm assuming that the 1.5 million is in the CDBG. I haven't seen the CDBG account, but I figure if that comes in, that's pretty much good number, because it's the 978,000 is also a good number. It's an Algemac account, so that's going to be good. So when I add all those numbers, with the exception of the 1.4 million, which is general fund money for 09, 010, we haven't even passed the budget for that, so that's iffy there. And if I take the others out, you basically have a $4.65 million. That's what you have. Those are good numbers.
Not sure.
You have a
Councilman,
4.657. That's the number you have. If you take the 1.4 out of it, you take those two grant funds out of it.
let me,
That's what you have.
if I could, Councilman Yusefian, let me just give you a quick tally of the funding sources.
Well,
So-
as you do that, Mr. Ahern, could you give
Sure.
Mr. Yusefian and all of us that tally, but also tell us which of these you're referring to?
Sure.
Our goal isn't to tell you you have to comply to our math. What we want to know is, if I may, Mr. Yusefian, I also want to know.
I'm going over
not
their
just
numbers.
I want to know what Mr. Yusefian is asking you is, money that isn't frozen, that, what he calls good money. I think he means good numbers. He means money that's actually available one way or another.
Sure. We have $1.4 million in fiscal year 09-10 CIP general fund money coming into the project. So in this fiscal year, 09-10, in the CIP, we have $3.7 million in CDBG money, $1.4 million in the state grant funding, the funds you were just describing, Councilman, and I'm just rounding the numbers up. And then we have approximately $1 million in the Algemax mitigation funds. So total rounded up numbers of about $7.5 million. So if you took out the state grant money of $1.4 million, you'd be down to about $6.1 million total.
Okay. And if you took the CIP money out,
Right.
that will bring you back to what I was giving you the number for.
Yes, that's correct.
The reason I'm bringing this up is because you should be able to build that park pool with this money.
Okay?
Okay? I've shopped it around.
You want to-
And if any of your consultants are telling you otherwise, get yourself a different consultant. And we've all gone out there and looked at it. Not just one person, not just two person, not just three person. People who have built pools all over this state. Larger pools. Nicer pools. So, and that's what I'm trying to do. I don't know what you need to do. I know your arm is having some issues, but you're going to use the other arm to twist some arms.
Okay.
And I like to know, if you can do this, then I'll go along. My main concern is going to come back to, how do we deal with yearly maintenance and operation of this pool? Because the numbers we had before were for different types of pools. They were a lot more expensive. I'd like to know what the maintenance operation is on this one. and what other ways we could do this. Can we just build the pool and just concession it out to reduce maintenance and operation? How can we do this? That's what I'm worried about more than building it, because most of the money comes from somewhere else.
Okay, just for the record, I haven't gone out and gotten bids. I wouldn't even know how. That's not my thing. I just, as I've said before, I do know that a number of people, not one, not two, more than three, individuals who are involved in the commercial construction of pools, not for home, in other words, have told me that they question the costs. So that's why I want a confirmation, not because I've sourced it myself. Mr. City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, the
My
best
resources
confirmation.
are different, by the way.
Okay.
They're not
The best confirmation you can get is bids.
Yeah.
That's why the suggestion of putting in alternates for things you'd like to have but not sure whether you can afford them or not, the best confirmation of what this thing costs is to get bids and get as many bids as you possibly can. If we were going out to bid today, I say likelihood is they could come in 30 to 50% under normal engineers' estimates. If it goes out a year from now, who knows what will happen in the market with all of the stimulus money that may be flowing into public contracts. That has us concerned. But right now, we're getting very good bids, and all of our engineers' estimates are significantly above what the market is bringing in for us. And we're getting lots
in
and
the
lots
next 3
of bids.
months, you'll get even better bids.
Well, we hope so.
Councilmember Najarian. Mr. Quintero.
Good. Do we need a motion, or?
We do. Councilmember Najarian, this is...
I'll move 2A
Second.
with the
option.
with the option to
Option 2.
option 2. Option 2 or option 3?
Option 2.
I believe it's option 2, and the way the motion is drafted, it's just as the preferred location, because we still have to go back and do some
Option 2.
SQL analysis. So the issue with the add alternates for the bids, doesn't have to be included directly in the motion. Staff takes cognizance of staff's heard that. We'll go back, and we've still got to come back to you anyway.
But we
With
should
final
make
plans.
sure that the intent is the rectangular pool, 6-lane, with the, I'll call it the water polo alternative as part of the bid package,
Again,
we're not-
As an option.
as an option, as an alternate bid.
Yeah, we're not at that point yet
Okay,
because
'cause that
we've
all-
still
that would all have to
got
come back
to
to you.
redo CEQA on this because
Right,
of
okay.
an issue that's come up.
And
But the-
actually, but before we go forward with this, Mr. Kisaki, could I trouble you? We've been out on various tangents, as we tend to do. Sure. Could you read the motion again, please, at 2?
At 2A is a motion designating the preferred Pacific Park Pool preliminary location plan, directing staff to conduct CEQA analysis and give staff direction on what configuration elements to include in the conceptual project plan.
Right. So this is not about
No, but I
one
think
design over the other. It's just that design may dictate, to some degree, what the configuration and location and so on, the conceptual.
so it's basically a direction to staff.
Right. All right.
So 2A, I'll move 2A designating option 2 as the preferred plan. The direction as stated by council previously.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Kisaki, could you call the roll, please?
Councilmembers Najarian,
Yes.
Quintero,
Yes.
Weaver, Yusefian,
Aye.
Mayor Draymond.
Yes.
Move to adjourn?
Second.
We're in adjournment.
Every time you're near, every time I see your smile, hear your hello, how you can only stay a while. Hey, I know that it's hard for you to say the things we both know are true. Well, tell me how can I forget when I'm in love with you? When I'm in love, you don't know things will never be the same. I keep forgetting all your
If you have a comment or question regarding Channel 6 programming, call us at 818-548-4013.